Still don't get a sense that there are 1,000 people in the hall. Good afternoon. That's it. That's it. Thank you, BMPA, for having me over. It's an honor and privilege. I've been on both sides of the fence over the last 36 years, but I should compliment BMPA for the way the whole thing has been organized. Though I've just had a glimpse of it, very, very professionally done, but more importantly, extremely difficult in a conference like this to do time management. Yes. And in a way, you've already put me on pressure कि 15 minutes के बाद एक raffle होने वाला है. But I also should make a confession. I guess this is the first time I'm speaking to an audience as huge as this. So actually, I feel vulnerable. And therefore, I would want to ask you, do you have a plan B, plan C? I hope the doors are closed. And I'm actually speaking at 3 handicaps. First handicap, Bharat Shahji speaking. Then you have Harsha Bogle later, and you are at lunch, and in between you have me. So who's going to listen to me? So therefore, keep the doors closed. But though jokingly I mentioned about vulnerability, what I'm going to speak really is about vulnerabilities. And in a way, Bharatji also in his previous session spoke about vulnerabilities, whether it's in terms of future might be very bright, but the reality is you'll have to accept it, could have failed the whole game plan of succession planning, etc. But before I get into it, why this whole printing thing is sort of resonating for me, and it's also got a nostalgia. My dream for joining ITC actually was because of a factory in Tiruvallur. So this was a printing factory which has recently celebrated 75 years, and my grandparents used to stay about 5 kilometers away. And there used to be a beach right in front of the factory, and always I would say, one day I should work in this factory. I didn't get a chance to work in the factory, but I used to visit the factory very often because my friends were there. The second connection to printing, and I was very happy when I saw Manu Chaudhary's name mentioned in the previous speakers. I don't know whether he's in the audience. I used to spend time at the CDC room per se when we were doing the brochures printing for different seminars and conferences. I used to come to the shop and there only do all the typesetting, etc. So it brought me back nostalgia, actually. So what I'm going to speak is about social investments. All of us would have heard about CSR. This is different from CSR in multiple ways. The first is the emphasis on the word investments. And the moment you're looking at investments, you're looking at long term. I at least don't have the pressure of what many of you must be having, which is the QSQT pressure. Quarter se quarter tak ka mere ko pressure nahi hai. I have to really look at what impact you can make in the long term. The entire thing is anchored on vision and values, but I decided to sort of change the pitch a little bit. I said, let me speak from my personal perspective. Having worked in 35 years, and again I picked up the cue in the previous session, where the whole mention was about pride. I said, I was reflecting, why am I here in this organization for 30 years? And in today's context, 30 years, you tell somebody, they say 3 years hi kafi hai, long service award de do. And the reason I've been with ITC for 30 years is, I felt very proud of working in ITC. Multiple reasons. I initially would have spoken about, like computer box was spoken in the previous session. Many of you would know about ITC e-Chopal. And I had the opportunity to be associated with it, where gaon mein chhatri lagate the, that's how we were known. Ye chhatri wali company hai. Because in 2000, VSATs and computers actually helped the farmers connect with the world. I'm not going to speak about that. 5 things that I have picked up today, what gives me a sense of pride. I think this gives me one of the reasons which gives me a lot of sense of pride. What you see is acres and acres of plantations. And why does it give me a sense of pride? This is in a place called Bhadrachalam. Tribal place. Many of you may not know that it was actually infested with Naxalism at one point of a time. And in mid-70s, much before CSR and all became a fashionable thing, ITC decided to set up a factory there. As the factory started growing, and as the requirement for pulp started increasing, the whole thing was, can I import pulp or do I have an alternative source? And what I will do is in these 10-15 minutes, key messages. I think the sense of pride has come because we chose the road less traveled. Why am I saying the road less traveled? We said, instead of importing pulp, can we actually create forestry in tribal areas, in degraded lands, so that these people get a livelihood, you have a reliable supply chain, not subjected to forex fluctuations, but more importantly, you're creating both environmental and social capital within the country. And today we have almost about 11 lakh such acres of forestry in different parts of the country. And many of you may not relate to what is 11 lakhs. It probably would be 5 times the size of Mumbai. Just visualize that. Second thing, what gives me a sense of pride. Again, 20 years back, today we are talking about a problem. 20 years we realized that if Indian farmer has to succeed, you have to manage his dependency on rainwater for irrigation. And this is from a place called Sihor. Absolutely dry land, water was not available, farmers were actually migrating. Today farmers grow 3 crops there. And the reason they grow 3 crops is because we invested on rainwater harvesting. And this is just one shot of when you talk of rainwater harvesting. This again goes kilometers and kilometers. And we actually did a drone shot. After some time, the drone had to be called back because the drone ran out of battery. But when you do this, it's not just one village that you impact the entire village along the river basin. Third, my personal favorite is the impact that we are doing for women and girl children. Our different interventions today touch about 60 lakh women or girl children. And endeavor actually, again, the reason why I'm highlighting is today we talk of DEI, in all corporates talk of DEI. DEI in corporate, you have only that much influence. But if you can actually work on DEI in the society, you are actually helping the whole country improve, the whole country progress a lot. And that's been our focus actually, and that's what gives me a sense of pride. Fourth item that gives me a sense of pride. वो हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना, तिनके तिनके से घोंसला बनता है. And one needs to look at holistic development. This is just one example of a family in Bhadrachalam. Many often you will hear corporates doing, I've done something on either education, somebody would do something on health, somebody would do on something else. But the family does not get benefited unless all their problems are addressed simultaneously. And that's what I call as integrated family approach. Family by family, you start working on making a difference for that particular family, whether it's the man in the household, the woman in the household, the children in the household. Now, once you do in the family by family, then you say, I'll do it village by village. How do I get every person in that village getting positively impacted and benefited through whatever interventions you're doing? And this is something that has been a focus for us. We are working closely on this approach in about 30,000 villages across the length and breadth of the country and in some of the most backward states. So these are the things that really gives me a sense of pride. So let me convert it into what's the takeaways for me and hopefully for all of you also. And I'm now switching gears 20 years back to now. Why is it becoming important today? Disruption happening. Disruption happening because of societal tensions. Disruptions happening because of environmental reasons. Need to do, because you have to conduct your business in a responsible manner. More importantly, regulations are driving, and having been in many of these panels, I see many of these regulations actually flowing down to the MSME sector also. And it's important for MSME sector to start preparing themselves right now, rather than sort of confronting with a challenge much, much later. But most importantly, it makes business sense. Customers, especially the international customers, especially the B2B customers, they're increasingly looking at how do you conduct your business. How responsible are you, both towards environment and society? And it will become inevitable for all corporates at some particular point of time to therefore look at what we call in ITC as the triple bottom line approach. Whatever you do, you should also do good for environment and society. I gave you the example of forestry. That's a classic this thing of where it's not only good for business, but it's also good for environment and society. This is one key takeaway. I think, and this has guided ITC for decades now. This was a statement made by our ex-late chairman, Mr. Deveshwar, where the firm belief was businesses cannot succeed in societies that fail. If there is one message that I would want the group to take away today, is this. It does not matter whether the business is large, small, medium, etc. All of us have to realize this fact that unless we have the societal license to operate, we can't succeed. This is how we look at it. I don't want you to get into the details of it. The key message here is, how do we decide on our priorities? So a lot of people may ask a question, ITC to sports mein kahin dikhta nahi hai. But sports is not a sustainability priority. Sports is maybe a national priority, but it's not a community priority. Community says, first mera roti kapda aur makan dekho, baad mein sports ki baat karenge. So we look at what is the convergence between all the three, and therefore we do what we do actually. So the whole approach, like what was mentioned, is transforming lives and landscapes. All the four words are important. First is transformation. I gave you an example of a family and a village. Second, you have to transform both lives and landscapes together. A lot of discussions about sustainable sourcing, where people focus, I have consumed less water, etc. But in the process, if you have not taken or done good for the society, that's not good enough. You just do good for the society, construct hospitals, etc., but not take care of the environment in terms of the whole climate change. It will not have the impact per se. So our focus has been on transforming landscapes. So we look at what's important for today. 5 broad themes: natural resource management. I showed the example of water. Then you look at the entire climate agriculture piece, where how do you ensure resilience of the farmers, whether it's the pulp food farmer or the agriculture farmer. Then at human capital development, we discussed about how 1 crore skilling was mentioned earlier, public health and livelihoods. All 5 have to go together, and they go together on certain principles. The fundamental principle which I want to sort of really leave with you is involve the community. You do not decide for them. Second, don't look at bechara attitude to the community. Most of us approach it bechare log. I can tell you with my experience, they are much more knowledgeable, much more smarter, etc. It's just that they don't have the ecosystem where they can flourish. Our role should be is to create that facilitative ecosystem where the native intelligence and innate intelligence can actually work. So these are just examples of what we do. Again, not so much important on what is listed here. One of the things, and again, this is business parlance that we have brought into social investments. We keep on asking the question, so what? What next? I might have done rainwater harvesting. So what? So therefore, you have to link it to irrigation. What next? Okay, you create the rainwater harvesting, but unless I reduce consumption of water also, I can't sort of address the issue. So that's what next. I might have done a village. What next is basically doing it at the entire river basin level. So constantly asking that question, so what? What next? This again the example of climate smart village, where you look at everything. It's not just about improving the yields and incomes, but how do you diversify and increase resilience? If the farmer is only dependent on crop, then he or she will get into a problem. But if it can have alternative sources of income, whether it's through livestock, whether it's through agroforestry, etc., even if the crop fails, the farmer has got something in hand. Big learning in the entire this thing is government policies. We assume that the moment the policy is there, everybody is aware and they will use it. Reality is very different. Awareness at the village level is limited. And even if they are aware, they don't know how to actually get those loans and schemes, etc. And that's what we focus on. Quick example on education. Again, the message here is you start right from early childhood, from the time the child gets into an Anganwadi. Then look at primary education. Do not repeat what the government is expected to do. So we don't get so much into infrastructure as much as into improving learning levels. And then look at secondary, especially the girl children, because there's huge dropout at 10th and 12th. And if they drop out in 10th and 12th, it leads to many other consequences. And our big takeaway is interconnected problems require interconnected solutions. So this is our footprint. Work in about 25 odd states, 300 odd districts. As I mentioned, 60 lakh women. We work extensively with government. We have only a small drop in an ocean, but if you have to make a bigger difference, you have to collaborate with the government. So we have almost about 90 public-private partnerships. Most people shy away from working with government, but we have not shied away. And as I mentioned earlier, working really with the community. Every intervention. So when we work in primary healthcare center, you will think, what is a community center there? You create Rogi Kalyan Samitis, and they sort of then get involved in the entire exercise. So this is really a quick summary. If you see in terms of multiple interventions at scale and all interconnected, which actually leads to transforming lives and landscapes. So how does it add to the business? So our entire business ethos for ITC is responsible competitiveness. Responsible competitiveness does not mean, very often we think responsible competitiveness means you will not be very competitive. You have to be aggressively competitive, but do it in a way that you take care of the environment, you actually focus on inclusive growth and development. Once you do that, you can actually create an enduring value. So today when I look back, if our printing factory in Tirupattur has completed 75 years, or if ITC has completed almost about 125 years, it's the enduring value that has got created because of this particular approach. Thank you.